This old man is an artisan in a Chinese world in which artisans are a dying breed. The skill to reproduce a Tang horse was passed on to him by his ancestors, who have made Tang horses for 1,000 years. For centuries, China was a land of artisans and peasants who struggled with small plots of land to support themselves and their families, as often as not unsuccessfully. The emperors, living in the Forbidden City in Peking, were remote figures to the peasants and did little to improve their condition. This is not all ancient history, for until well into the 20th century, China was a land which stood still. The civilization which once designed complex astronomical equipment for charting the stars had not moved beyond the Middle Ages. When the outside world did reach China, it was to exploit the people. The introduction of industry benefited foreigners, such as the British and Japanese who built the factories. It did little to change the ways in which the people of China had always lived. In 1949, following a chaotic period of war and revolution, the communists, led by Mao Zedong, took hold of the country. Their philosophy and goals are the driving forces in China today. The aim, to become a modern industrial nation with world power. To this end, China is now in the process of a forced industrial revolution. Despite the militant face she presents to the world, there are enormous difficulties. The huge resource of manpower is largely untrained for the technical requirements of an industrial nation. China now has only a fraction of the technicians she must have to fully realize her aims and potential. China has the resources for industrial growth: petroleum, uranium, coal, and iron. But these remain untapped for lack of machines and trained workers. When the communists came to power in 1949, the country was living, as one writer put it, in an early Iron Age economy. Working capital was almost non-existent. And the human back carried the burden of any progress. One of the regime's first moves was to bring all of the country's industry under state control. Production goals were established by Peking, and loyal party members became the new management, replacing the former owners. The workers were told that their obligations were to the state. Then, in the 1950s, the Soviet Union began pouring in financial, technical, and scientific aid. The first objective was to build up heavy industry. Modern steel mills were built and expanded. For in order to produce machines, to industrialize, a nation must first have steel. While Chinese production figures are generally inflated, Western experts acknowledge that steel production has increased by more than 10 times since 1949. Heavy industry began to develop on a large scale. China was developing the capacity to produce complex modern machinery. The development of transportation was another requirement for industrial growth. The new mile-long road and railroad bridge across the Yangtze River is a dramatic example of China's progress in this area. For the first time in China's history, it became possible to move goods continuously from the north to the southern industrial centers. Another assault on the transportation problem was begun in China's Detroit. This auto plant at Changchun in Manchuria produces about 30,000 liberation trucks a year. Originally, the Russians supplied almost 90% of all of the steel that went into their manufacture. But by 1963, the Liberation Truck Factory had become largely self-reliant. There is no such thing as a private car in China today. All cars and trucks are owned by the state. And while there are trolleys and buses on the streets and roads of China, much older forms of transport still dominate the scene. Progress in modernizing agriculture has been slower. The Chinese farmer today is still relatively untouched by the Industrial Revolution. Yet the country's greatest need is to constantly increase food production to support an ever-growing population. Tractors are being built, but a 9,000-mile trip down the whole length of the country failed to show them in meaningful numbers. Though the principal effort of the state has been to develop heavy industry, the consumer has not been entirely overlooked. Many new textile factories have been built since 1949, some of them using equipment entirely produced in China. If China is to build a modern economy, she must train skilled technicians in large numbers. And this she is desperately trying to do. In 1952, the Institute of Iron and Steel in Peking enrolled 400 students. In 1965, there were almost 6,000. It is here that future metallurgists and chemical technicians are being trained. At the Institute of Petroleum, engineers are learning how to exploit China's oil resources. And at the Institute of Minorities in Peking, students come from such distant points as Inner Mongolia and Tibet. A prerequisite for any university education is a devotion to the political system. Students seldom express personal ambitions. They will go, they say, where the state thinks best. As industry grows, so inevitably grows the city. New factories need manpower, drawing people from the countryside. The Industrial Revolution has dramatically changed the face and the nature of life in cities. A new housing development in Shanghai called Pumpkin Land is symbolic of the great efforts to accommodate the growing population. But construction efforts race well behind the needs. The nursery or kindergarten is now a vital part of every new construction program, factory and housing alike. Here, mothers who have heeded the regime's call to labor leave their children and pick them up at the end of their work shift. This fast-growing city population must be fed. And though the problem of food production is acknowledged by the communists, it is not evident in the major cities. Food stalls visited at random seem to offer abundance and variety. Also, stores supplying consumer goods seem generally well stocked. But it is difficult to know how much of these goods the average worker can afford. China's Industrial Revolution has given the city dweller leisure time he rarely enjoyed in the past. Young people are departing from the ways of their ancestors. Such a public display of affection would have been unthinkable in the past. Modern health services are now available to the city dweller at little cost. At the Peking Hospital for Heart Diseases, all of the instruments, from the surgeon's scalpel to the heart-lung machine, are of Chinese manufacture. But the most dramatic example of China's scientific and technical progress came on October 16, 1964, when she exploded her first atomic bomb. Though the country has fallen far short of her popular slogan, exhorting the people to produce 20 years in one day, and though the overwhelming numbers of Chinese are still untouched by the Industrial Revolution, she has made, as we have seen, some enormous strides. The promise of success lies with the new generation now learning the skills of an industrial age. The evidence available to the West indicates that China is well on the way toward achieving her goal of becoming an industrial nation of international influence. The question that one must then ask is, how will she use this power when she achieves it?